Oh, it's definitely in the top 10. After all the hype and the rave of this anime, it's definitely in the top 10. But I think it might be landing on a different list. This is Sparda's World Extra, reviewing Boku Dake ga Inai Machi anime and manga at the same time. And not only that, but this is going to be a two-part. So this first part is only going to cover the anime, because I saw the anime first, though I read the manga a little bit in between the anime ending launch, and as well as ending the manga before reading the anime, finished up the anime itself. So yeah, I pretty much did both ways, and I managed to finish off the manga first, because I want to get everything ahead of time. Regardless, I should have just waited, but it didn't really change my opinion one way or another. That's going to make my final verdict of this series. But this is the review of mine, and of course, it's going to be spoiler heavy. Well, I can't guarantee how heavy it will be, but it's definitely going to be spoiler, so you should be aware of that. But before I get to the review, I just have to make a comment. This is one series that I believe it's my first experience to see the overly hyped, overly praised by the people that I didn't even think that was even going to happen with this anime, no less. It's not that I don't think it's, I don't think this anime deserved it, because I never heard about it until now. I was under the impression Winter would be just a chill out. I know there's some series that's actually good, but I thought the Winter would be just a chill out and just wait until spring where the real deal begins. That still could be said the same right now, but to my knowledge, I would never guess that this series would be one of the series that people would be overly praised, and up to the fact that it could have been like a next big thing since, well, I'm not sure what they consider next big thing, but if we go to like my anime list, say like they almost made it seem like the Stein Gate of 2016, the Full Metal Alchemist tier, Brotherhood version. It's maddening. I was wondering what is up with this series, so I check out about the concept, the premise, and everything about this series, and I even learned about his history from the mangaka himself. So I decided to read this. Well, first I decided to watch it, but I waited until the final episode was approaching so I could binge watch it, and my mind is still fresh from this series, as well as reading it down the line. But I read the final chapter before the anime ending releases, so it all happened in one go. But at first I thought it would be a bad idea to do that, just to have my opinion differently. But I have split their opinions apart from these two. So one is for the manga and one's for the anime, and they have their own representation of the series. So what I think overall, well, one thing for sure, this series has a lot of upcoming, has a lot of hype surrounding them, and because of so much hype, it could only land to one or another. It can only land to these two options. It could be a great success of its hype, or a great disappointment. So one would think, where does it land? Would it be great success or a great disappointment? A great disappointment is what I got. That's the end of it. And overall, before I get to the review with the entire explanation, I thought this anime was such a grand disappointment. I thought the series itself is such a grand disappointment. It's a series that I really, really wanted to like so much. I just want to like it too. I can't say it's an awful series. I can't say it's a terrible series. But I can see why there's so many people are getting so frustrated with this series as the series goes on, like episode 11 or like whatever in the manga. The manga is very low key, since the fact that nobody really reads the manga and the anime is pretty much where they are looking at the most. So nobody really have that much of a judgment on the manga. So, but even if I'm coming back from the manga, I'm going to only talk about the anime in this part. So you have to join me for the manga in the second part. But let's go back to the anime itself. I thought this anime was a grand disappointment. It has so much potential. It has a lot of good premises. An interesting one, no less. It has a good concept, a good build-up. And everything just feels flat. Everything just didn't really hit home run. It feels like everything is just wasted on something that's on too predictability of the series. And it's nothing wrong with predictability, but what is done is something that just seems very lackluster. It doesn't have the thrill. It feels like when it comes to the ride itself as in being they call it a psychological thriller series or whatever this may call. When it comes to the ride, when it comes to enjoyment, it's there. It's up there. At least for the first 4 episodes, it's really up there. Later on, it doesn't really get that much, but it's still good parts in some area. But when it comes to resolution, it seems so flat and it doesn't seem so impactful. It never left a real powerful impression. Never really leave any impression that makes you think that, like, wow, this series is very clever or this series is very thoughtful. It could be a little bit thoughtful when it comes to explaining, like, how this person does the murder part, but it never really come across anything that's very unique or anything that's very special. It just seems very overly done and at the same time overly like it just doesn't meet the hype. It even if you don't follow the hype, and I don't even follow the hype, which is the reason why I have binge watched this instead of like just following along with what everybody else has been doing. I just binge watch because I need to just get out of the way, and nonetheless, I will have my mind very fresh from this series, so I know everything what happens. And it seems weird how every time in the discussion board, it seems like people are forgetting what's exactly wrong with the past episode and what some of the parts doesn't really connect, or why it keep feel like it just brush aside. And I'm not going to talk about the manga. Again, that's the second part. This is all focused on the anime. So this is what I thought about this anime. It just I really wish I would have liked this a lot more. I really wish I would have liked this, period. I'm not saying it's terrible, but I thought it just could have been much more. It could have been something. It just feels like the third act. The third act of the series, which is pretty much the final time skip. Not the very last with the epilogue part, but the very last time skip, as in going through the coma. I feel like everything just fall off apart, and it really shows. Like I said, this series really depends on the thrill ride, such as like if if Kyle is going to get killed, where is Kyle? Where did she disappear to? Was Satoru actually managed to do what he needed to do going back in the past? Anything like that is all absent in the later part of the series. Even once Kyle was done with her storyline, it seems like everything just lost its perks. It lost everything that makes it special. It's not to say it would have been a perfect series if it would have kept the way it went, but it could have been. The way how the manga made it worse, but I won't go through that. But it could have been explored more. It could have been expanded in a very good way to make us convinced that this is the reason why we should go back in the past. And the funny thing is, the past is actually the more interesting plot in terms of over the present time, let alone the main plot. But let's just start from the beginning, because I want to go to pros and cons. So the story goes this way. Satoru Fujinoma is a mangaka artist who is unsuccessful, and he's pretty much detached. He's 29 years old and has the power, a mysterious phenomenon, which he calls a revival or returns, reruns, whatever you want to call it. And it's a power that have given the ability to grant him to go back in time to save lives. So if a person were to die from some causes, it will go back in time and it will give him another chance to fix that problem in order to save that person's life. However, when he's wrongfully accused of murdering somebody close to him, in this case, it was his own mother, Sachiko, he's then sent back in time. And when revival usually sent back in 5 minutes, 2 minutes, in this case, it sent him back to 1988. And the reason for this is because this is where he realized the connection between that murder of her mother is actually connected to the first murder of that murderer committed back in 1988, and that would take place around the center of that girl Kayo. And now, because of this realization, he determined to go back in time to 18 years ago and prevent the death of his classmate while protecting those who care in the present. So it sounds interesting. It has an interesting premise, mainly because he has this revival, as they say. The revival is actually a pretty nice premise, especially how it works in terms of like the process, such as he sees somebody gets killed or not see somebody get killed, but he's around the area where somebody gets killed. And once the time repeats itself, it only tells him that somebody's just going to die. Therefore, he has to fix something up in order to save that person's life. Now, the one problem that I have with this is actually it became a plot hole, or it became a loose, it just became something that is missing. And that is the explanation of that power. But anyway, let me go full focus on Pro. But like I said, the premise is interesting. I like the fact that it could, it could go go back in time, try to correct itself. And it's funny because it's really good in the first 4 episodes. It felt like it was going to use a lot of advantage of this time traveling, especially where Satoru is going back in time as a 10-year-old going 11, but with a mind of a 29-year-old from the present time. So everything he should know about what's going to happen, or what he has been doing, or everything he's reliving their life in this middle school, the elementary, And it could have been a lot interesting, especially how like in episode 3, 4, how they made it like, it almost feels like if you ever play a Telltale's game like The Walking Dead or The Wolf Among Us, it always has that sense of feeling where he trying to like do the ice skating, and then he's trying to remember if he were to win that ice skate, if he win the ice skate, everything will remain the same, or if he lose the ice skate, everything will changes. What is the thought process? And then he ends up finding out that it's the exact same that he did, so nothing has changed. That could have been a very interesting premise if the mangaka, the original writer, actually pulled this through further, which is a little bit saddening to see that it didn't go through that far. But still has an interesting premise, and this whole time traveling thing. Like I said, the whole revival, the whole thought process, the fact that you could actually think what to do as a 29-year-old, with a 29-year-old mental, but in the body of a 10-year-old, and what the limit can you do to save a person's life or two. So I like certain characters. Certain characters are actually pretty good. What I like is 2 things that sticks out to me. One is Kayo. Kayo is the one that actually has a subplot that have an abusive mother, and she is the first target, so to say, the first target of the serial killer to get killed before everything goes back to the normal. Everything goes to the same route as as Satoru remembers. So yeah, because of that, you have Satoru actually growing a bond with her throughout the course of the series. A good 9 episode or 8 episode, whatever it may be. It happened a good 2/3 of the entire series, if you count only by the anime time. But the fact is, we see them bonding together, whether it's selfish reason or not. And it's funny because I didn't think it would be that charming. It's actually pretty charming to see this whole relationship between them. It doesn't need to be love. I know. I don't worry. I will address this elephant in the room, but not yet. That's much later. Anyway, I like these relationships. These two were bonding together. With Kaio actually growing, getting developing into a character that's that's no longer lonesome, and they could relate to each other. They feel like they are erased from the town they're living in. They feel connected. They feel like they could actually relate to more than just not only just the town they live in, but it's just everything about them, each other. They could connect. They click. They have a lot of great moments together. And that Christmas tree scene in episode 3 is one of the great highlights of this series. Or since this is still early in the winter since this is the early 2016 of anime, this was one of the better scenes, one of the coolest scenes to see. It's so delightful, and I like the cinematography in that episode, in that scene. Everything about it feels very relaxing, and it just feels great. It feels charming. This whole subplot with her, I thought it was captivating, thrilling, and charming. And I know some of the part about the abusive mom is pretty over the top in some many ways, but even so, it's the bonding between these two that actually sticks out to me. And Kaio is actually a pretty nice character as she grows up, and finding to see more of an outside look of the life that she's in. I thought that before I go to about the more of the in-depth of how that works, I also have to mention about Satoru mom, Sachiko. I thought she's really cool. She's probably like among the better moms that you ever see in many anime series. She's really helpful, especially in the past. She's definitely the most helpful person. She's like, because of something like that, you kind of wish you could stay in the past more so than go into the present and give a lot of time to the past before we go to the present, which they did, but at the same time it don't, which I will explain why. But regardless, if she was a very caring mother, she is a very nice mom, and you kind of wish you just didn't went to the present time, especially let alone the fact she is dead in the present time. But again, she came off as a really nice, cool person. I like the atmosphere this series brought up. The atmosphere, is all delivered by the director himself, and he does a great job on bringing the atmosphere. At least in the early episodes, I thought it feels like it really set the tone. It really gives me the impression what I'm going to go for. It gives me the impression what I'm going to see from that point forward. This whole thrill ride, this whole cliffhanger, one after another. It almost seems like it's going to be a fun ride, and there will be some like a little bumpy moments. That you get some of those, but it's still going to be really intense. This is going to be something that we will leave with a great impression overall. Which but either way, I thought it was creating the good intensity. It has a pretty good animation at times. I'm kind of surprised the last episode didn't have the most spectacular moments. More spectacular. Doesn't feel like it's a great grand thing that you have from the first episode or even the second episode, no less. I always feel like the third episode was the best of the best. And not only that, the anime used a widescreen shot when it comes to going to past time. Which is funny because if you look at the past, if you look at the past and you compare it to the present, when you watch the past episodes, it feels like it's not only the widescreen made it very cinematic, but it also kind of hides that the A1 animation studio. This is the one they're the one that behind this adaptation. The A1 studio, you could see that the animation. With the widescreen, it helps them to expose so much about their animation budget. It's not to say they're terrible, but they're not exactly the greatest of all anime studio. They're not really that. I don't know if I would place them top 3 or even top 5, but they still do a good job, and the widescreen does help the best. But when it goes to the present time, you kind of see that it doesn't have the same quality, and it kind of feels like you kind of see where's the whereas the detail actually starts to lack. But regardless, that's something that you have to nitpick. But it does help with the widescreen to hide up the effect and hide up some of the moment. And again, because of episode 3 being taking place in the past, it has that widescreen, so it feels even more cinematic seeing the Christmas tree scene. The music is engaging. I like the music. I maybe not be the most memorable thing, but it's definitely something that really helps the show up. It really brings more of the tense atmosphere that it needed to bring. The whole thrill ride, everything about it is all good. So everything feels like the introduction, everything, it feels like it's all good. It feels like the subplot is interesting. It's charming, sad at the same time with the Kaio arc, as they want to call it. And it almost feels like we're going to have a great show. It feels like the hype is going to deliver. Even though I'm not following the hype, but I was wondering, maybe this hype is really legit. Maybe it's the real thing. There are times when overrated series is overrated, but it deserves a lot of credit. And then there's a series that's overrated and it doesn't really deserve all the credit that it's asking for. And this one falls to the latter. This is where I have problems. As much as I like the subplot of the series, the main plot suffers. And the main plot is the whole killer thing. And I know the focus that Satoru is actually going after the kids that get killed in the past, that will lead to saving his mom. I understand that is the real premise in some form of way, but he did focus a lot on the killer. He did focus a lot on how to stop the thing. And the fact that Kyle was like a subplot thing is like, it's like you don't want to leave that arc. It only goes, to me, I feel like once episode 9 happened, once it ended at one moment, once it ended the Kyle arc focus and everything, I noticed that the anime suffers. I noticed the story suffer as well, because it feels like none of the later quests, that later focus, really match well with what we have experienced from Kyle. I'm not saying every kiss should be sad. I'm not saying everything has to be depressing, but a lot of things are not really exciting, not thrilling. And some of that, it really loses its perks. It loses its charm of what makes the series so great. And it's not has to do with pairing at all. It's just that Kyle was done too good for his own kind. Again, I'm not saying it's a perfect series if you just leave with Kyle, but it could have been just really good. It could have been pretty good, but it's one of those series that it overstays its welcome, and when it does, it just feels like everything it falls apart. It's one of those series like you gotta know when to end. You have to end it sooner before it gets bad. And it seems like if you look at the original script, the original writing, the original source, it kind of has that sense that the mangaka wants to get out of there before it's too late. And some form of way, he was too late to even do that. And it's not even just about the focus. It's not about like how to write more focus on the kids, but it's more of like what to do with the whole scenario that without Kyle being the main focus, or with the whole abusive thing. It almost feels like if he was handled with another guy, another person, he would have made this into a longer series with a more detail and more interesting main plot, as well as more subplot that seems to be caliber on the Kyle arc. It doesn't have to be that good as Kyle, or it could be, if he could do better, then that's great. But if he can't do it better as Kyle, then that's okay. And nobody can do the same thing. Nobody can really match up well. But it just doesn't feel like anything is interesting. Everything feels so rushed. And that goes the same to manga, but I'm going to go with anime first. Everything seems to rush. The main plot with the whole serial killer could have been interesting, but it feels like it loses its focus, because and that's another problem. We spend so much time with Kyle, which is, like I said, I know I praise it with the subplot with Kyle enough. But there's a problem when you focus too much, especially with an anime series that only has 12 episodes. It has 9 episodes of Kyle, and then everything else is just like, oh, let's just hurry up and just get to the point and just get a killer, boom, bam, bing. It's just there. It came so quickly. And we see Satoru trying to search on the killer. We see that. We see him trying to research who's the killer. I'm not, even though he doesn't investigate as a kid, as an asking question, doing some Detective Conan, I know he's not doing that, but he is doing he is trying to find the killer at the same time trying to solve the problem. In the present time, that's where you got him trying to search who's the killer, what's the motive or whatever, what's the list. But it never really come back again until like episode 10. Episode 9, it's the second half of episode 9, it feels like, what to do? What can I even do? What can I even make this arc interesting? I don't know. Let me just rush this girl to be in this side, and boom. Let me get Hiromi into my side, and boom. It felt so rushed. It felt like he doesn't have any grand master plan. And it's just funny because it's like he did a lot for Kaio, and then by the time when she's ended, what's your next plan? There is no next plan. It felt like we was going to get a long running series, but instead we just got a very short one, a 44 chapter, but in this case 12 episode. And because the reason why I mentioned the manga, because it suffers the anime. The focus, it seems like, is uneven. The focus is uneven, especially when there are characters that's underutilized. I felt like Kenya could have utilized more. I mean, I like the fact he was trying to help Satoru, but it never really clicks on, and it never really have him do anything more. I feel like other kids' characters could have done more. I feel like Artie could have done more as well. Despite her backstory with her father is silly, she could have been more helpful, but she just disappeared completely from episode 6 and never mentioned again. She only did one good, she only did one good deed in episode 5, and then 6 she got in trouble with fire. But it just feels weird how it's like the opening, the ending. I guess the ending, the opening made it suggest that she's pretty important, she's pretty relevant, but she's really not. She's really not relevant, and I feel like the fans is just only holding up to her because they just like what they see, which is fine. But I feel like if you utilize more of that character, if we spotlight her more, I will start to care about her. But I couldn't. I didn't care that much of her because that timeline, it don't exist. Literally, that's what happened. Other than that, there's some underutilized characters. I feel like it could have put more into depth. I feel like it could have put more relationship with Satoru, because Satoru really, the main three I see that highlighted a lot is Kaio, his mother, rightfully so, and Kenya. Kenya didn't get too much in the anime, at least, but even so, I feel like they would have a lot more potential to working together and actually have Kenya to do a lot of helping, but it never really put up. Is because the suffering of the rush of the pacing. The pacing gets really unequal. When it comes to after Kaio ended, it becomes very weird because the pacing goes quick. Even if you don't read the manga, I know it was quick because it felt like everything is happening at speed. Everything is happening so quickly. One problem gets solved after another. One new one comes in, and then this one comes out. The memory is lost, then memory comes back. Everything was going crazy fast. You couldn't even understand or comprehend what is going on. You couldn't understand what the character is even thinking anymore because it's going fast paced. You don't have the time to dwell in the relationship between two characters or one character thought of another. You just gotta go with it. And again, it's like the pacing, it feels like the director knows that the series doesn't live up to this potential after Kaio was dealt with, which is funny because he erased a scene that Kaio does return in the manga. But again, I'm trying not to get too much in the manga, so this is the last time I'll say so. When I get to the manga, you will see why I have to mention it many times. But anyway, the point is, it's still rushed, regardless if it's just rushed because you don't need to read the manga to know it's rushed. It just is. You get that feeling, and like I said, it happened at speed. It's funny because it's like Naruto no Taizai, the same studio. Go figure, right? It's the same thing with that series. When it hit to the one big arc that the manga has, when the anime went through, even if I didn't read the manga, I would know that it's going fast paced because everything is happening so fast. One bad guy shows up and he's one of a pretty important one and gets defeated quick. It's like it happens so fast. This development's happening out of nowhere. That's what happens with this series. It went crazy fast paced, and you don't need to read a manga to know it. It just is. Well, another thing that's really I had to mention about the revival. The revival never got explained. Why did Satoru went back all the way to 18 years ago? How exactly did it even trigger? Why now? If the trigger only did it for 5 minutes or 2 minutes, whatever it is, why it went to 18 years? And then it makes it worse when you find out that he went back in present after failing to do the first reset. And then he goes back by screaming, go back in time or get back or something like that in front of the cops, which is kind of funny because I kind of expected him screaming and the police would be like, the hell are you screaming? You're under arrest. Get out of here. I expected that. But how does exactly the time travel, time reset, whatever, how does the revival works? It never really explained. All you need to know, he said get back, didn't embarrass himself, actually get back, and then he claims it will be his final chance. Well, what basis? And if for that matter, if he did the justice with Kaio, why he didn't return back home? What's stopping him? Are you telling him, good job, now you will stay here and relive as your 11-year-old self? Have fun. Where does it say it? What's the rule? Why he went back in present, only to go back in past again? Why everything it seems? Hey, why they pick at that specific time? What is the rule? What is the rule? I don't get it. There's always a rule. And it's funny because you don't hear me complain about why he has that power. I'm not even asking about the origin of the power. I'm asking how it damn works. It never really explains it. So I don't even understand what's the principle behind it. At that rate, you might as well have a fairy godmother or something to tell her, hey, you wanted to be a hero? Get back in time. I'll give you this reset. I'll give you this one chance to finally make yourself a hero. Go back, and then episode 6, you failed once before, but you could do it one more time. And when I say one more time, it will be your final time. However, you should know if you go back, you can never go back in your present. Something like that. It's funny how more supernatural stuff could actually benefit than just something that he just could do because why not? His plot convenience all over the place. It's crazy. I don't even understand. And anticlimactic resolution. This, even with Kaio arc, it fell flat as well. Again, it's funny because the whole build up, the whole ride, the whole anticipation is always up there. It's like not the greatest of all, but it's always like something that we get us so invested. We get invested with these mystery, these thrilling suspense and disbelief, whatever the case may be. And then it gets to the ending. It gets to the ending of any problems. It just feels like that. It feels quick. I said quack. It feels quick. If it happens, especially with Kaio, her mother, we're supposed to believe that after all 9 episodes of her being such a bitch, then her mother shows up, Kaio's grandmother shows up, then everything just changes around because he's telling us a story that she was abused by her husband. And, she's taking all the anger on Kaio because I believe Kaio reminded her of her husband. And from there on, that's where the life started to change. The only thing I like about that scene is where she's crying, the adults is the only one that feels pity, but the kids is the only one that feels rather ungrateful. Not ungrateful. It's basically they don't feel no passion. And rightfully so. But still, it just seems really out of the left field. And it feels like it's something that could have been solved in the first place. Like, if you were to not call it child support or whatever, how come you didn't thought about this grandmother thing in the first place? You made it sound like you can't do anything. There's no any guardians for that mom to have in order to change her outlook. But no, there's the grandmother. Where the hell she has been then? So why is such a convenience of this whole of this resolution even happen in the first place? Why does it have to be so anticlimactic? And that goes to the main plot itself. And what I say about the main plot is the villain, the murderer, the serial killer, whatever. The mystery, I gotta say this, the mystery does it's weak. It's a really weak mystery. And I know a lot of people like to defend saying it's not the genre. It's not mystery genre. I get it. But the story, put it up there. The way how the character addressed it, put it up there. So that means I got to get invested. I got to start thinking. You told me to think. So why even bother to tell me to think if you're not going to if you're going to tell me all this plot line, if you're going to tell me the suspect list, the clues, everything, why bother doing that for us audience? I know you could try to say, but the mystery is really within the characters. If the characters don't know, then that's still a mystery for us. Even if it's very obvious, it's still a mystery to the characters. I understand that, but the problem is, you should just have the killer to be exposed for us audience. In fact, you could have had just Yashiro. Yashiro is the serial killer. Yes, that was the main plot twist. But you couldn't have Yashiro already demonstrate that he is the killer. We see him doing his bid or see him planning his thing. And then, if say like Yashiro going outside with a car, and then you see Satoru, and then he decided to say, "Hey, Satoru, how about if I give you a ride?" It would give us a thought of, oh God, don't go on a ride. He's going to kill you. I got a bad feeling. And then, he won't kill him. Then later on, oh shit, he's going to kill him for real. Okay, he won't kill him. Then this time, he will kill him. Something like that. That would be a new thrill for us to handle. But instead, it's trying to make us like, he's the killer. He's the killer. He's the killer. And then when you say, oh, this car? It's not mine. Oh, yep, he's the killer. Yep, there you go. He's the killer. And it makes it worse when Satoru actually has a lot of proof that he is the killer. And yet he didn't want to do it because plot convenience, I guess. And nonetheless, that he even had said that he was in the suspect list, but I just dismissed him because he was with my mom. What? It doesn't matter. He has candies. Candy is a big clue. You can't dismiss anything like that. It's weird because he's smart. He's smart in a lot of things, but not in that part. It just doesn't. It feels very plot armor. It's just like a plot armor for him to not to get caught right away. And I did not like the fact that Yashiro motive isn't really captivating, and it's not really something that this series should have. I know every serial killer is born in different way, or it has their own motive, but I feel like in the terms of storytelling in this series, it should not be something like just does it for fun, and it just really throws me off, and it just feels like it doesn't have that many of a good purpose of the series. It just feels like everything just doesn't really gel in, and it just feels like kind of random, if you ask me. I know y'all should have been there, and I know they've been trying to develop a relationship with him and Satoru. Kind of wish they had more time in order to make me convinced this final bout in the final episode is more thrilling and more investing. But it just never really clicked for me. Regardless, I feel you could tell the series is trying to be very clever by giving you two twists of he's the killer, even though it was very obvious because there's the way how the story goes. If anything, you should never have the suspect in the first episode very obvious exposing as being a guy, being old, wear glasses, have red eyes, I guess, or have this specific color hair. Because with that, it could have been, it's just too much of a giveaway. If you could just have a guy, you don't even know if it's a boy or girl, man or woman, you will actually start thinking a lot of different, you would just start thinking differently. You would start thinking like a lot of suspects in your mind. But it never really gave us that. It didn't even give us any of those to really find out who is the killer. Instead, they make it too obvious it was the teacher himself. Not only just by looking at him, but it's just the way how the cinematography, which is ironic because that's their strength, and now it became their weakness for the mystery side or the plot twist side, and it just gives too much away, and it's just you already know that's really the killer. And I don't want it to make it that obvious. I don't care if it's not a mystery. The way how the story addressed, the way how Satoru will find it. It's not, it's pretty much give you the idea you should find out who's the killer, who you should find out who is the identity behind him. But it never really does that. It does that. Instead, it acts like it's still being a very clever story, which is not, because it's just right there. It's so exposed. And because of his motive being weak and all that stuff, even the climax between these two, Satoru and Yoshiro, it was anticlimactic as always. It's funny because all of a sudden he pulled a Batman and Joker moment on him by saying like, "You need me to live for yourself to live," and stuff like that. All that stuff happened so rapidly, so out of nowhere in some form of way. I mean, I understand to try to build it up, but I feel like the build up wasn't saying that way at all. It says something else. He just says like he's just that crazy. That's really it. I don't know how this whole "I really want you to be my trophy, I want you to be my pedestal" or whatever. I never really got that approach, and somehow we do, and that's how he beat him. And he beat him in like a very questionable way, especially how he jump off the roof. And should the wheelchair be like, landing with him or landing very near him? Instead, it made it seem like he managed to push the wheelchair to the side, like he just palmed it, or like air pressure out of there. It just seems so wacky. It didn't really amount to a lot of things. And for what we know, why not that wheelchair just landed on one of the characters? Who knows? You never know. And it's kind of funny how you just look at him and he's like at the rooftop, like, he could just try to run out, but I guess he just gave in. Whatever. That's how it ended. The ending itself, by the way, is mediocre. I thought the ending it didn't live up. It feels rather fast, especially with the fact that we've spent a lot of time on Yashiro versus Satoru in the showdown. It could have been good, but if everything just feels flat. It just didn't feel like it's just that much investment that we went through from the past experience. And I know he used all the past experience to address on how he beats Yashio or something like that. He pretty much, in a way, he strangely talked no jest to him. It's something I really try to avoid it. I actually said to myself, is this Sandin still or not? I mean, not to say the Sandin can have that, but it just seems so strange, don't you think? I don't know. That's just my opinion. But either way, I still thought that the whole thing was very anticlimactic. It couldn't done much more. If I were to compare the manga, maybe I like it more a little in the anime. Be surprised or not in terms of that. I don't even know. But the ending still is largely the same, with everybody get their life. What's his name? Satoru becomes a successful manga up to the point he has an anime adaptation, which does mean successful, and life is good. Blah blah blah. Somehow he meets up Artie, which we have not seen since episode 6. It's funny how it works. I would have said it's a plot hole, but you could argue that it is really the fact that this so-called fate has met in one under the bridge or something like that. Okay, but I'll save this for later. So you see everything just fall apart. I can't really do it much justice. I am planning to write this in a review form, in a written form. But I feel like a lot of things, so much promises just disappear. It's such a wasted potential. It's one of the series that you wish it was written by someone else. And, I would talk about the director himself, but in the next part. And I'll tell you why I will save it for the next part. But in here, it has an interesting premise. The whole revival thing, it sounds cool. It's the time travel thing. Yeah, I know it's nothing new, but it's still a cool feature, a cool idea. The way how it works, especially, certain characters are good. Even if they don't get develop a lot or utilize a lot, they are still good, and they could be pretty likable. They did the atmosphere is tense with the engaging music, and sometimes the way how the camera, the way how it pinpoints the actions in terms of like what's there to be afraid of, what's there to like I said, what there's to be afraid of, such as if that person got killed or that killer is on the way to your location. It has that thrilling ride. The whole animation. The animation is pretty good. The widescreen does help a lot, believe it or not. It got nicely directed at certain scene. Mainly the first 4 episodes. I feel like the director did a really good job on directing them. The subplot with Kaio, basically the Kaio arc, as you want to call it, is actually the really meat of this entire series. And sadly, this is where it all ends in terms of pros, because the cons shows you that because of the subplot like that is so good, the main plot suffers since it didn't get that much focus. It's uneven. The character gets underutilized. The mystery, the way how they try to build up for the main plot twist is weak. It never really got very engaging because of the obviousness and the lack of creativity of creating more suspects or more evidence or more depth of mystery approach in terms of finding out who is the killer. It has a pacing problems by the episode 9 or even early episode, but episode 9 the most notable for. The climax is weak. They never really pay off. The payoff is really weak in my opinion. You got plot holes like the revival will never get explained. It just happens because it's convenience. The series is full of conveniences. The ending is mediocre. I thought it was above, maybe slightly above average, but I thought it was just overall a disappointment. I wanted to like this series a lot. I let alone just like it too. But I can't say I hate it. I can't say I dislike it even. I just feel like it's just another series. It could have been so much more. And, people tell me read a manga. It's done differently. My anime skip a lot of moments, skip a lot of content, and you get more out of a manga. And the way how people keep saying about like, oh, that's too bad this character gets cut off and stuff like that. So it only tells me maybe the manga is better. Maybe it's a huge improvement, right? Well, just join me in this part 2. That's the end of part 1. Join me in part 2 if you really want to know my thoughts on the manga and the full conclusion of the entire series.